Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode recap and thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 6 of The Loud House, Space Invader. We begin this segment with the Loud siblings in the bathroom to prepare for their nightly rituals. Lincoln gives a speech that starts with a similar line from Star Trek, and he explains how he relishes having his own room or his own personal space, as he's the only one of the siblings who gets their own room. Lori and Lenny share a room, Luna and Luann share a room, Lynn and Lucy share a room, Lana and Lola share a room, and Lisa and Lily share a room. And Lincoln admits that his room is just a linen closet that was modified to be a room, but he still wouldn't trade it for anything else. But then we hear an argument between Lynn and Lucy, and the other siblings want to stay out of it, and Lincoln agrees with those sentiments, and he heads off to his room hoping that this won't affect him in some way. But unfortunately for Lincoln, he gets dragged into it. What happened is, Lynn knocks on his door and wants to sleep with him because she's too angry at Lucy to sleep with her in their shared room. Lincoln tries to persuade her against it, saying how cramped his room is. But Lynn sort of guilt trip him about sleeping in the bathroom tub and giving him puppy dog eyes. Lincoln begrudgingly accepts, but stresses that it should only be for one night. And Lynn can't really seem to keep her hands off of his property, like his action figures or his clock, and even tosses Bun Bun, even though Lincoln tries to establish some ground rules. And it doesn't help that the events of the night don't go very well, whether it's Lynn playing some lucha libre with Lincoln or throwing a ball against the wall to help her sleep, even though it's disrupting Lincoln's sleep, and giving him a Dutch oven. Upset with this, Lincoln ends up sleeping in the bathtub, and he ends up being woken up when Lori turns the shower on. After waking up, he tries to tell Lynn that the one night is up and that he doesn't want to keep doing this, or reaffirming that he only agreed to one night to let her stay in his room. But Lynn and Lucy are still arguing, and Lynn decides to stay with Lincoln, claiming that he's a better sibling to share a room with than Lucy. This later cuts to with Lincoln and Clyde heading to school, and Lincoln not sure what he can do since he fears he can't just kick his sister out of his room, even though she is invading his personal space because of her feud with Lucy. Clyde, though, points out that Lincoln is a good roommate, which probably helps with why Lynn wants to stay in his room. Lincoln figures he'll try to be a bad roommate to convince Lynn to not stay with him, but he has to execute his plan after school. His attempts at trying to persuade Lynn to go back to sharing a room with Lucy includes him dressing like Lucy and acting like Lucy, but Lynn just thinks that it's a funny imitation. He even tries some of the things that Lynn annoyed him with, like he tried the lucha libre thing, he even tried a Dutch oven, but it all backfires, and Lynn wants to permanently stay in his room with him, which Lincoln is upset about. After another night of sleeping in the bathtub and being woken up by the shower, he notices that Lucy is throwing a tennis ball against the wall of their room and sighing, and Lynn is looking at Lucy's poetry book. Lincoln pieces together that the two actually do enjoy sharing a room with each other, but both of them won't admit it to themselves or each other. As Lincoln explains this to Clyde mentions that dinner time might help. After sidetracking Clyde gets sidetracked about a dinner night with Lori for romance, but Lincoln thinks the idea of getting the two together to talk at dinner would still be a good way to have them resolve their conflict with each other. But once again, he has to wait until after school to resolve this. After school, he puts in a note under his door where Lynn is currently in his room, and he puts a note in one of Lucy's poem books. This leads to the two going into their shared room for this dinner, and they both think that one sent the other to apologize to them, but they're upset when they won't. The other sisters don't want to get involved with this. Lincoln shares their sentiments, but decides he has no choice but to get involved. He confesses that he was the one who sent the invites to both of them, and he outright points out that they actually do enjoy sharing a room with each other, but they're both too stubborn to admit it. This then leads to a food fight, which leads to Lynn and Lucy bonding again and hatching things out with each other. But the room is too messy for them to stay in for the night, and so they persuade Lincoln into letting him bunk with him for the night. The segment ends with Lincoln admitting that sometimes you gotta learn how to share, but he also stretches that this is just for one night where they're both staying in his room. All in all, I definitely felt this was a much more enjoyable segment than Sound of Silence, its sibling segment. This one was a unique example since sometimes, while Lincoln can sometimes end up starting a conflict, this was one of those instances where Lincoln actually didn't start the conflict, but rather he got dragged into it unwillingly. With Lynn wanting to share rooms with him, presumably because the rest of the sisters already are sharing rooms with each other. And I think it wasn't unreasonable that Lincoln was upset that Lynn was invading his space, because he did agree to one night, but Lynn sort of took advantage of his hospitality. But as we did find out, it wasn't really out of malicious reasons. It wasn't, more like unintentionally so, because the real reason was because Lynn and Lucy were just too stubbornly proud to admit that they actually do enjoy sharing a room with each other, but neither one really wanted to be the one to apologize, and that happens a lot in real life. There are situations where both people are at conflict with each other, but they really do enjoy being around each other, but neither one wants to apologize to the other because of pride. And that kind of was a nice way to show, while Lynn and Lucy definitely are opposites in a lot of ways, they are not so different in other ways too. And it did bring up a good point how Lincoln had to kind of get involved, even though he didn't want to get involved, and understandably so. Who wants to really get in the middle of other people's problems? But he realized the only way Lynn and Lucy would hash things out with each other was if a third party stepped in and pretty much pointed out how their pride is getting in the way of them. And that was nice. I really liked that. So this was definitely a fun segment. It was nice to see that we got to see a little more insight about Lynn and Lucy. And it was funny to hear Jessica DeSico arguing with herself, since she voices both Lynn and Lucy. And it was a nice case where we got to see Lincoln's... A lot of fans do think of Lincoln as sort of a peacekeeper among his family, and this might have been one of the segments that influenced that choice, or influenced that interpretation from some fans. But it was nice. Like I said, this was a nice way to show that it took a break from the usual mold. It showed Lincoln being unwillingly dragged into a conflict, but also being the one to help the ones at conflict with each other resolve their issues. And yeah, it was a nice way to show siblings may get on each other's case from time to time, but they still care about each other deep down. So this was definitely a good segment, and it was especially nice to see after Sound of Silence. So with that, we're now done with episode 6, discussing episode 6 on this channel. Take care, and until next time.